Hello, I'm Dr. Natália Pinazza. I'm a lecturer in Portuguese at the University of Exeter, and my specialism is in Latin American cinema. This is a series of lectures on the Brazilian film from 2015 entitled The Second Mother, directed by Ana Milaed. In fact, the original title in Portuguese is Que Horas Ela Volta, which literally translates as What Time Does She Come Back? The meaning behind the English title Second Mother and the original one will be explored in this series of lectures. But firstly, I will situate Milaed's work within a Latin American context. I will discuss how the figure of the domestic worker emerged as a recurring motif in contemporary Latin American cinema. I will consider the increasing international visibility of Latin American female directors such as Milaed. Then I'll take you through issues of class and spatial segregation in Brazil and how by focusing on the domestic sphere, the film The Second Mother is addressing societal concerns. And finally, I will draw a parallel between The Second Mother and Milaed's subsequent film Don't Call Me Son, Mãe Só Há Uma, from 2016, and the reason I provide this parallel is that there is a continuity in terms of preoccupations with class and gender. So drawing a parallel between Don't Call Me Son and The Second Mother can provide a better overview of the director's work, especially because these films have some things in common and they were only made 1 year apart. So perhaps one of the first things to note about The Second Mother is that the film is made by a female director, Ana Milaed, and while there have been female Latin American directors that had made films with a certain global reach before, Ana Milaed belongs to a generation of female Latin American directors who have gained international appraisal since the beginning of the 21st century. Here I included a few examples for reference. There is fellow Brazilian filmmaker Tata Amaral, who directed films such as Antônia and Céu de Estrela, Starry Sky. There is Peruvian filmmaker Claudia Llosa, who directed films such as Madenusa and La Teta Asustada. La Teta Asustada was the first Peruvian film to be nominated for the Oscars, so it gained a lot of international appraisal. There is Argentine director Lucia Puenzo, who is best known for films such as El Niño Pez and XXY. There is another Argentine director, Lucrecia Martel, who is arguably one of the most prestigious directors in the history of Argentine cinema. I will later mention some of her films, such as La Ciénaga and La Mujer Sin Cabeza, when we consider the role of the swimming pool in The Second Mother. And here you have a picture of The Second Mother's director, Ana Milaed, who is also a television director, producer, and screenwriter. She's originally from São Paulo, Brazil. I also want to briefly mention Regina Casé, who plays Val, the protagonist of The Second Mother. Interestingly, Casé is also a TV personality in Brazil, and she presented a TV show entitled Esquenta on Globo. Globo is Brazil's biggest TV network. As a TV presenter, she displayed an ability to communicate with a socially diverse audience. This versatility also comes across in Casé's award-winning performance of Val, which is the maid, the protagonist in The Second Mother. The film The Second Mother attracted both Brazilian and international audiences. In fact, it was Brazil's entry for the foreign language category at the 2015 Academy Awards, even though it ended up not being nominated. The film The Second Mother centers on Val, a northeastern migrant who left her daughter Jessica in the northeast to work as a living maid in São Paulo. Please bear in mind that going from the northeast of Brazil to São Paulo City in search of work is a common pattern in Brazil. So Val works for this upper middle class family and she raises their son, Fabinho. After about 13 years, over a decade, her daughter Jessica decides to go to São Paulo to study architecture. There are tensions between mother and daughter because Jessica does not accept how her mother is subservient to her employers, and Jessica challenges this hierarchy. In doing so, the whole film narrative foregrounds historical issues of class, and as we are going to see, the film also charts an ongoing change in Brazilian society. The second mother also resonates with recent trends in Latin American cinema, in which political reality is filtered through the personal experiences of characters in the domestic sphere. This focus on the maid and the film's conscious exploration of the domestic sphere allow readings of these films to hit home. So local audiences immediately recognize the social dynamics and class conflicts represented in those films. I selected a few examples of portrayal of the domestic worker in the cinema of other Latin American nations. There is Afonso Cuarón's Roma, which centers on a living indigenous maid in an upper middle class household in the Colonia Roma, a neighborhood of Mexico City in the 70s. The film had an enormous success, including 10 nominations for the Oscars, and it won Best Foreign Language Film, Best Cinematography, and Best Director. There is Sebastián Silva's The Maid, which centers on Raquel, who has worked as domestic servants for the upper class Chilean family for an upper class Chilean family for 20 years, and like Val in The Second Mother, Raquel also has this confusing status as being simultaneously the servant and one of the family members. There is also Argentine film Cama Adentro. The story is set in Buenos Aires before and during Argentina's 2001 economic crisis and depicts the transformation of Argentine society through the lives and relationship between an Argentine upper middle class woman and her longtime maid daughter. And there are other examples in Brazilian cinema too. There is Domésticas, which is an episodic film focusing on 5 maids in São Paulo. Therefore, The Second Mother centers on an emblematic figure of Latin American society, the hard-working housekeeper, who after a long time living in a household becomes a mother figure to her employer's children. And we will discuss how the portrayal of this recurring figure, the domestic worker, brings to the fore social political issues.